Hello everyone. Tonight we're going to plunge headfirst into the clanking, muddy, and often utterly terrifying reality of medieval warfare. But we'll also step onto the dazzling, perilous stage that defined the very essence of medieval knighthood, the tournament. Forget those pristine, polished images of knights in shining armor, gallantly charging across sunlit, pristine fields. Tonight we'll explore the arduous, brutal, and utterly compelling path of the true medieval knight, the grim realities of battle, and the glittering spectacle of the joust, all without the safety nets or mass media of our modern world. The forge of a warrior, from boy to knight. Our story begins not on the thunderous battlefield, but in the drafty, echoing halls of a great castle, with a young boy, barely 7 years old. He isn't there by choice, but by a solemn arrangement made between noble families. He is a page, sent from his own often lesser noble house to serve in the household of a greater lord, a powerful baron, an influential count, or even a duke. This wasn't merely a polite visit. It was the indispensable first step in the meticulous, painstaking crafting of a medieval knight. There were no military academies or boot camps, no formalized recruitment offices, no standardized entrance exams. Instead, a boy learned by total immersion, by constant, watchful imitation, and by sheer, grueling repetition. As a page, he learned absolute obedience to his superiors, intricate courtly manners, how to address a lady, how to stand in the presence of a lord, and, crucially, how to serve with quiet deference and efficiency. He'd run endless errands, assist the castle's ladies with their embroidery, music, or daily affairs, and most importantly, begin his physical training with mock weapons, learning to wield a tiny wooden sword, a small, light shield, and to ride with a nascent, often wobbly, confidence. Every clumsy movement, every muttered lesson from a grizzled old knight was observed, and corrected, often sternly, by the seasoned knights and squires who were his constant, silent instructors. He was a sponge, absorbing the very essence of chivalric life. As he grew older, typically around 14, his training intensified, and he would graduate to the more demanding rank of squire. This was where the truly serious education began, a rigorous, intensely personal apprenticeship that forged not just muscle, but character. He would become the constant attendant to a specific knight, chosen for his prowess and reputation, assisting him in every conceivable aspect of his daily life, from helping him don his impossibly heavy armor piece by painstaking piece, to meticulously caring for his prized warhorse, ensuring its health and readiness, and most importantly, honing his own fighting skills with real, albeit blunted, weapons. Imagine him spending countless hours each day, sweat pouring, muscles aching, practicing with the heavy long sword, the balanced lance, and the crushing mace, striking relentlessly at a wooden dummy that spun menacingly, or sparring fiercely with other squires, building the immense strength, the crushing endurance, and the lightning reflexes so desperately needed for actual combat. He'd learn advanced horsemanship, not just riding gracefully, but controlling a powerful, unpredictable warhorse amidst the terrifying chaos of battle, charging and wheeling on command. Beyond the purely physical, he would absorb intricate tactics, fundamental strategy, gleaned from seasoned warriors, and perhaps most importantly, the complex, often contradictory code of chivalry, lofty ideals of courage. Unwavering loyalty to his lord, a fierce sense of justice for the wronged, and the solemn protection of the weak and defenseless, particularly women, children, and the church. This profound education wasn't gleaned from books. It came from direct, bone-deep experience, from intimately witnessing his knight's conduct, both in times of peace and in the crucible of war, and from endless repetitive drills that burned skills into his very muscle memory, making them second nature. Finally, usually in his early 20s, after years of dedicated service, after proving his prowess and unwavering courage in battle, or in the controlled fury of a tournament, he would be formally knighted in a solemn, often deeply spiritual ceremony. He might spend a night in vigil, praying, before taking sacred vows to protect the church, to defend the defenseless, and to serve his liege lord with absolute fidelity. It was a passage from boyhood to the fearsome, revered status of a knight. The weight of war, armor and weapons now. Picture this newly made knight, a figure transformed, preparing for the ultimate test, war. There were no lightweight, high-tech uniforms, no composite materials engineered for minimal weight and maximum protection. His very defense, his lifeblood, was his armor, a massive, custom-fitted suit that could weigh anywhere from a staggering 50 to 80 pounds, sometimes even more for the full-plate armor of later periods. This wasn't off the rack. It was forged by a master armorer, precisely shaped to his body. First, he'd don a padded gambeson or an arming doublet, thick layers designed to cushion blows and prevent chafing from the metal. Next came the glistening, heavy chainmail, a flexible mesh of countless interlocking rings, offering surprising protection against cuts, but vulnerable to crushing blows. And finally, in the later medieval periods, the intricately articulated plates of hardened steel, masterpieces of the armorer's art, each joint designed to allow movement while deflecting brutal force. Each piece, from greaves protecting his shins to gauntlets shielding his hands, had to be carefully fitted, strapped, and buckled by his ever-present squire, a painstaking process that could easily consume a good half-hour. Imagine the sheer physical exertion, the slow, deliberate effort, just to put on this heavy second skin, designed not only to deflect blows from swords, arrows, and lances, but also to restrict movement, making every action, every breath, a conscious effort, a fight against the very weight of his protection. His weapons were equally formidable, extensions of his own will and strength, honed by years of practice. The longsword, a heavy, perfectly balanced blade, was his primary companion, used for both vicious cutting and piercing thrusts. He might also carry a brutal mace or a devastating warhammer, blunt weapons specifically designed to crush armor and bones beneath. A sturdy shield, often emblazoned with his family's proud coat of arms, provided crucial immediate protection, a mobile wall against incoming attacks. And of course, there was the mighty lance, a long, heavy wooden pole, often 10 to 12 feet in length, tipped with gleaming steel designed for the devastating unstoppable impact of a cavalry charge capable of unhorsing a man or impaling him. His warhorse was no mere steed. It was a specially bred, immensely powerful animal meticulously trained for the terrifying sounds and sights of battle. The screams, the clash of steel, the thunder of hooves, its own guarding adding to the colossal weight it carried. Without modern manufacturing, every single piece of armor, every precisely forged weapon, was painstakingly handcrafted by skilled artisans, blacksmiths, fletchers, leather workers, making them not just tools, but incredibly expensive, precious, and irreplaceable works of art, passed down through generations. The roar of the charge, battle realities. Forget the neat, organized lines of a modern army, communicating via radio and GPS, orchestrating movements from afar. A medieval battle was a horrifying, chaotic, deeply personal, and often bewildering affair. There were no radios, no field telephones, no satellites guiding movements. Communication on the battlefield was rudimentary at best. Guttural shouted commands that were often lost in the overwhelming din. The piercing blare of trumpets, signaling charges or retreats, the thunderous rhythmic roll of drums, or the fluttering, visual guidance of brightly colored banners. Once the cavalry charge began, a terrifying wave of thundering hooves, or the infantry lines inevitably clashed in a desperate, surging scrum. All semblance of cohesion quickly dissolved into a maelstrom of violence. Imagine the deafening, soul-shaking roar, the ground literally trembling under the thundering hooves of charging horses. The sickening clang of steel on steel as blades met armor, the guttural shouts of men, the agonizing screams of the wounded piercing through the cacophony. The very air would be thick with swirling dust, kicked up by hundreds of feet, the acrid smell of sweat, the metallic tang of fresh blood, and the pervasive, cloying stench of primal fear. It wasn't about precision strikes from afar, but visceral, face-to-face, hand-to-hand combat, a brutal, exhausting grind of hacking, thrusting, and parrying in a desperate, claustrophobic press. Knights might, in theory, try to target other knights for the valuable prize of ransom, hoping to capture rather than kill. But often it devolved into a simple, desperate struggle for mere survival against a faceless, determined enemy. Arrows would rain down from archers, a deadly, whistling hail, forcing men to huddle behind their shields or fall beneath their deadly shafts. Swords would hack with brutal efficiency. Maces would crush bone and armor with sickening thuds, and lances would splinter with a sharp crack. Fatigue set in quickly and agonizingly under the immense weight of armor and the constant exertion, forcing men to fight for minutes, gasp for breath, rest for mere seconds, and then plunge back into the fray, their bodies screaming. The ground would become a churned-up, slick mess of mud, blood, and discarded weapons, a grim testament to the brutal struggle. The romanticized glory of battle often gave way, terrifyingly quickly, to the grim, terrifying reality of survival against impossible odds. The test of patience. Siege warfare. Not all medieval conflicts culminated in open-field clashes. In fact, many, perhaps most, revolved around siege warfare, the long, brutal, and often tedious process of attacking a heavily fortified castle or city. This was less a test of raw, spontaneous courage and more a grueling test of patience, endurance, and applied engineering. There were no artillery pieces lobbing high-explosive shells, no aerial bombardment to soften defenses. Instead, besiegers would employ ingenuity and relentless effort. Siege towers. These were massive wooden structures, often ingeniously constructed taller than the castle walls themselves, complete with ramps to allow attackers to storm the battlements directly. They were slow to build, incredibly vulnerable to fire, but terrifyingly effective if they managed to reach their target unscathed. Imagine the creaking of the timber, the laborious ascent, knowing you were a prime target. Battering rams. Enormous tree trunks, often capped with an iron head, swung by dozens of men with immense force, designed to smash through gates. Defenders would desperately try to drop rocks, scalding hot sand, or even boiling water, or pitch on them from above to deter the attackers, turning the area below into a hellish zone. Trebuchets and catapults. Giant wooden machines, true marvels of medieval engineering, using counterweights or tension to hurl massive stones, diseased animal carcasses, or even fiery projectiles over walls. These were the heavy artillery of their day, slowly but surely pounding formidable fortifications into submission, stone by agonizing stone. Mining, a clandestine and incredibly dangerous technique where sappers, often skilled miners, would dig tunnels secretly under castle walls or towers, shoring them up with timber as they went. Once beneath the target, they would fill the tunnel with flammable materials, set the timber on fire, and then quickly retreat, causing the tunnel to collapse and hopefully undermine the wall above it, creating a devastating breach. Ladders and hooks. Simple, desperate, and often suicidal attempts to scale walls, usually met with fierce and bloody resistance from defenders above, who would push them down or hack at their hands. For the defenders cooped up inside the castle, a siege meant agonizing rationing of food and water, enduring constant bombardment day and night, and fighting off relentless assaults with crossbows, longbows, and boiling liquids or stones dropped from narrow murder holes. It was a harrowing war of attrition, with disease, starvation, and thirst often claiming more lives than actual combat. Imagine being trapped inside a besieged castle for months, watching your precious supplies dwindle, your people sicken and die, and the massive stone walls slowly, agonizingly crumble under relentless attack, without any way to call for swift reinforcements from the outside world. The fear of betrayal from within, or a sudden, final assault, would be constant. Chivalry. Ideals and brutal realities. The lofty ideals of chivalry were meant to temper this inherent brutality. Knights were sworn to protect the weak, uphold justice, and fight honorably, often even to show mercy to a vanquished foe. They were expected to act as Christian warriors, defending the church and the innocent, upholding a code that aimed to civilize warfare. A captured knight, especially another noble, might be taken for ransom rather than summarily killed. The concept of ransom was, in fact, a crucial part of medieval warfare's intricate economy. A captured knight was valuable alive, representing a potential fortune in land, silver, and horses for his captor. But the grim reality often clashed violently with the shining ideal. War was still bloody, chaotic, and often driven by ruthless self-interest and personal vendettas. Peasants and common folk were frequently brutally treated, caught in the crossfire, and even knights, despite their vows, could engage in horrifying atrocities. Chivalry was a powerful moral code, yes, but it was often selectively applied, a lofty ideal struggling to survive in a very harsh, unforgiving world where power and survival were often the true arbiters. The tournament, more than just a game. By the 12th and 13th centuries, tournaments had evolved into elaborate, popular spectacles, far removed from their earlier, more chaotic origins as free-for-all mock battles. They were massive events, drawing crowds from across regions, often lasting several days, and incorporating elements of a modern fair, athletic contest, and royal celebration all rolled into one. There were no grand stadiums built for this purpose. Fields would be temporarily marked out, often with wooden barriers to separate the combatants, and temporary stands erected for noble spectators. Banners, richly embroidered, would flutter everywhere, proclaiming the identities of the competing lords and knights. Why were tournaments so incredibly popular? For knights, they were a crucial chance to showcase skill, to demonstrate their meticulous training, their raw courage, and their martial prowess in a highly visible arena before their peers and potential patrons. Gain honor and reputation. A successful performance could dramatically elevate a knight's standing, attracting favorable attention from powerful lords looking for loyal, capable retainers, or from families seeking to marry their daughters to a rising star. Win wealth. Victors could legitimately claim the armor and horses of defeated opponents, providing a lucrative source of income and allowing them to expand their own retinues. Attract a spouse. For a young unlanded knight, a string of victories in the tournament could be his ticket to a prestigious position in a great lord's household. Or even more importantly, a wealthy marriage that would secure his future and establish his lineage. Practice for war. While often ritualized and safer than real combat, tournaments were still dangerous and served as excellent training for real combat, keeping knights physically sharp and tactically aware. For the vast array of spectators from noble ladies to common villagers, tournaments offered thrilling, live entertainment, a chance to see their local champions compete, to witness incredible acts of bravery and horsemanship, and to simply enjoy a much-needed break from the relentless grind of daily life. Imagine the deafening roar of the crowd, the vibrant colors of the banners fluttering in the wind, the triumphant blare of trumpets announcing each round, the thunder of hooves, a true feast for all the senses. The joust, the ultimate test, the most iconic event of the tournament was, without a doubt, the joust. Picture two knights, mounted on powerful, specially bred war horses, galloping at full tilt towards each other down a long, narrow strip of ground, often separated by a wooden barrier to prevent head-on collisions. Each knight wielded a heavy lance, 10 to 12 feet long, aimed directly at their opponent's shield or helmet. The goal wasn't necessarily to kill, but to unhorse the opponent, to strike them with such precise, bone-jarring force that they were knocked from their saddle and sent sprawling onto the ground. The impact was immense, a sickening collision of wood, steel, and muscle. Lances would splinter dramatically with a loud crack. Armor would groan under the strain. And often, one knight would be sent tumbling to the ground in a cloud of dust and clanking metal. Injuries were incredibly frequent. Broken bones, severe concussions, internal bleeding, even death. Despite specially designed blunted lances and improved plate armor in later periods, the sheer kinetic energy involved made it an incredibly dangerous high-stakes sport. Imagine the collective gasp of the crowd as a knight was unhorsed, followed by thunderous cheers if he rose valiantly, or hushed, somber whispers if he lay still, a grim reminder of the real dangers. The winner would often perform a caracole, a ceremonial parade before the cheering crowd, receiving prizes or perhaps a favor from a noble lady, his honor publicly proclaimed. Beyond the joust, melee, and other contests. While the joust captured the public's imagination, earlier tournaments often featured the melee. This was a chaotic, often free-for-all mock battle involving dozens, sometimes hundreds, of knights fighting in a designated area, using blunted swords, axes, and maces. It was a brutal, exhausting affair, far closer to real combat than the joust, designed to truly test a knight's endurance, teamwork, and tactical awareness in a confused, swirling scrum. Imagine the vast cloud of dust rising over the field, the constant din of clashing steel, and the desperate shouts for air from within their heavy armor. Other contests included archery contests, testing skill with the longbow or crossbow, vital weapons of war, sword fighting on foot, more controlled duels, allowing knights to demonstrate their footwork, agility, and intricate swordplay outside the confines of horseback. Martial games, such as quintin practice, striking a rotating dummy with a lance or sword, often designed to swing back and hit the rider if not struck correctly, or ring tilting. These events were meticulously officiated by marshals and heralds, ensuring a semblance of order and upholding the complex rules. Heralds, in particular, were crucial for maintaining the pageantry and ensuring proper recognition. The pageantry and the feast. A tournament wasn't complete without its immense pageantry, an explosion of color, sound, and visual splendor. Noble ladies, dressed in their finest silks, velvets, and jewels, would watch from elaborately decorated stands, often lending their favors to their chosen knight for good luck, a gesture that fueled the ideals of courtly love. Banners emblazoned with vibrant family crests fluttered everywhere, proclaiming the lineage and power of the assembled nobility. Trumpets blared with triumphant fanfares, drums rolled a steady beat, and minstrels sang songs of chivalry and heroic deeds. And after the day's contests, the celebrations continued with lavish feasts in the great hall of the castle, or in specially erected pavilions. As we've discussed before, these were spectacles of roasted meats, flowing fine wines, and constant entertainment. The lord hosting the tournament would spare no expense, as it was a direct reflection of his own wealth, power, and generosity, enhancing his reputation across the land. Imagine the boisterous camaraderie, the endless tales of bravery, and the profound sense of shared achievement that filled the hall as knights reveled in their victories or commiserated good-naturedly over their defeats, forging bonds that might last a lifetime. The social fabric, status and opportunity beyond the spectacle. Tournaments were crucial social events, deeply interwoven with the medieval social fabric. They were prime locations for powerful lords to observe and recruit talented young knights into their retinues. They provided a rare dynamic opportunity for knights from different regions to meet, exchange ideas, share military experiences, and even forge lasting friendships or bitter rivalries that might spill over into real conflict. For a young unlanded knight whose future often hung on his martial prowess, a successful run in the tournament could be his golden ticket, pathway to a prestigious position in a great Lord S household, a strategically advantageous and wealthy marriage, or even a direct grant of land from a grateful patron. It was a brutal but vibrant pathway to social advancement, a temporary suspension of strict inherited hierarchy in favor of demonstrated martial merit and courage. Tournaments were, in a way, a medieval meritocracy in action, at least for the knightly class. The enduring legacy of chivalry and tournaments. The era of the medieval tournament, though eventually fading with the devastating rise of gunpowder weaponry and changing warfare tactics that made heavy armor less effective, left an indelible, magnificent mark on history and popular culture. The image of the chivalrous knight, the thundering charge of the joust, the glittering pageantry of the medieval lists, and the ideals of honor and courage continue to fascinate and inspire us, fueling countless legends, books, and films. But behind the romance and the idealized image was a life of immense discipline, grueling physical hardship, and a very real, constant understanding of danger and the fragility of life. Knights lived and competed without the safety nets, the extensive medical care, or the instant mass media we possess today, relying instead on their raw strength, their unwavering courage, their deeply held honor, and the powerful resonant clang of steel, wielded by their own capable hands to carve out their glory and their place in a demanding, unforgiving world. They were truly the rock stars and professional athletes of their age, embodying the martial spirit and the highest ideals of their time. So as you drift off to sleep, perhaps you can hear the distant, majestic blare of a medieval trumpet, the deep thunder of hooves on a grassy field, or the excited roaring cheer of a long-ago crowd as a knight is unhorsed. Imagine a world where honor was literally forged in steel, and glory was won in the dust of the arena, not by machines, but by the sheer will and might of men. Good night.